Hey guys, it's Sam for Digital Meat, and in this Rizom UV tutorial we're going to have a look at we're going to have an overview of the user interface and explain what it all means. So the first thing we need to do is get an object into Rizom UV from Cinema 4D. Now I have actually did a tutorial about the Rizom bridge, so if you haven't seen that I'd go back because that's what I'm using. I've just made this object here. It's a really simple cup. I mean, it's got you know, an inside and out. It's very, very simple. So I'm just going to select this makeshift cup and export to Rizom UV. Boom. So there we are. We've opened up in Rizom UV. So the first thing that you're probably going to want to do is sort out how you're going to navigate around the program. And that can be done by going to Edit up here and going to Keyboard Mouse Customizer. What this will do is allow you to choose a control scheme that you're used to. So in my case, I'm a Cinema 4D user, so I'd want to choose Cinema 4D and then save and close. But if you're coming from another 3D program like Maya or 3ds Max, you can actually pick a control scheme that suits your needs or is familiar to you. You can also customize your own control scheme. So there's that. I'm choosing Cinema 4D, so I'm going to hit save and close. Okay, so on the left of the screen we have the 3D view. We can navigate around this view using the same controls as your chosen control scheme preset. Like I said, in my case it's Cinema 4D, so exactly like Cinema 4D, I can Alt left click to rotate around, I can Alt right mouse click to zoom in and out, or even use a zoom wheel, and I can Alt and click the mouse button into do this. So it should be very, very familiar to whatever control scheme preset you've chosen. We can also change the view by using the view tool in the top right hand corner of the 3D viewport. We have back, left, front, right, and a top and bottom. On the right hand side of the screen we have the UV view. At this point it's looking very much like the 3D view on the left. This is because we haven't made any cuts and unwrapped any of our UVs yet. So let's take a look at the edit mode bar, and it's this section on the left here. First of all, we've got the select tool at the top here, which is already highlighted. It allows us to select points, edges, polygons and UV islands. We can switch between points, polygons, etc. by using these four buttons here. So we've got points, we've got edges, polygons and UV islands. We can also flip through each of these using the first four F keys. So I can press F1, F2, F3 and F4. And if you look on the right here, you'll notice that this changes depending what mode I'm in. So if I press F1, I'm in point mode. It's going to give me some information about points and all the things that I can do with points. And similarly, if I go to edges, you can see that we've got a whole new bunch of options now. So this will change on the fly depending on what mode we're in. Okay, so I'm just going to choose edge mode. On to how we make our selections. There are different methods of making selections which can be found in the area tool section here. So let's go through these. I've got select selected, and we've got the rectangle mode. So let's I'm in edges here. So with rectangle mode on, I can click, drag and select a load of edges. Great. The next tool is the lasso tool. So I can do this and it will select like that. And then this one I think is called the polyline tool. I can make selections like this. And the last one is the circle tool, and I can make selections like this. I mainly stick to using the rectangle tool, so I'm going to flip back to that. And yeah, let's move on to the next section. Right, symmetry mode. You'll find that here. This first button enables symmetry on or off. So let's just turn it on. You'll notice that in the viewport we've got some different colours now, and this is basically just to lay out where the line of symmetry is. So underneath the on-off button for symmetry we have the actual settings for symmetry. So if I go into this, you can see that we can choose where our symmetry plane is. So this is the plane in which it sits, so that's this. Or I can go to ZX, which will be this way, which is no good, and XY, which is this. So you can choose where the symmetry plane is. You can also choose the symmetry plane position. So we've got world origin, which is where it's at the moment, or we've got the mesh bounding box center for the object. So this is kind of like a local coordinate for the for it. And now if we flip to this one, you'd expect that we could, you know, it's pretty symmetrical, that we could make changes to both sides of our symmetry. Now, these points, these red points here, are actually indicating that there's an error. And that's because in this direction, our object isn't perfectly symmetrical. As you can see, we've got a cap at the bottom there, whereas we don't on the top. Inside as well, it's not the same. And that's something to be aware of. Symmetry detection will only work if the mesh is perfectly symmetric in terms of its point distribution. So just bear that in mind. It's not perfect. So yeah, bear that in mind. Okay, let's come out of our settings, and in fact, let's make a let's do this so our symmetry plane's back where it should be. Turn this off. Let's make a selection in symmetry mode, and just to make sure that everything's working as we hoped. So I'm going to select some edges on this side, and as you can see, they're selected on the other side as well. So it just speeds up the process. If you've got a symmetrical object and you want to make cuts on this side, those cuts will also be made on this side. It just speeds things up. Okay, let's turn off symmetry. Now at this point, I'm going to perform a quick unwrap to better explain some of the other functions in the UI. So first I'm going to select edge mode and make some cuts. So we're already in edge mode, that's good. So what are the controls for selecting cuts? Well, on the right hand side of the UI, we can have a look at the help section. So I'm just going to close up this lot just to maximize the help section here. This help section will dynamically change based on what tool we have selected and if we are in point, edge or UV poly mode. The help section also displays content based on the control scheme preset we chose earlier. As my control scheme is the Cinema 4D preset, let's jump back over to Cinema 4D and have a look at loop selection. So let's go back to Cinema 4D. Okay, so when we have the move tool and edge mode selected, to make loop selections, I can double click on an edge. So I'm just going to go to move, make sure my cup's selected and go to edge mode and choose an edge and double click on it. Oh, there we go. So we've got a loop selection now. If I wanted to add to this selection, I can actually hold shift, select a new edge, and as you can see, I can add to the selection. And the same goes for, I'm just going to undo that, same goes for double clicking. So if I hold shift and then double click a new edge, I can actually add another loop selection, and I can keep doing that. So in Rizom UV, you'd expect to see the same behavior. So let's pop back over to Rizom UV and actually have a look in our help section here. Here we go, double left mouse button, select loop path. So that is a loop selection. So let's do that. Let's select our loops and then we'll go from there. So I'm going to select this one down here. There we go. That one. I'm just shift clicking our edges, and that one. That'll do, that's a good selection. Okay, so now we have our edges selected, we need to cut them. That is handled up in this section called seams. Here we can cut edges and weld edges back together. To cut edges, we can press the cut button, which is this one here. Seems quite obvious, it's got a razor blade on it, but we don't have to press that button. We can use its keyboard shortcut, which is C, which makes sense, C for cut. So let's just hit C. Notice how our selected edge has turned from teal to orange. This lets us know that these edges are now cut. Okay, so now we're going to select a path cut. If we go back to Cinema 4D, this can be done in the move tool again. So let's go back to Cinema 4D. We've got edges selected and the move tool. Yeah, we can do a path cut, well, a path selection in Cinema 4D by selecting an edge, then holding Control and Shift and selecting another edge. And as you can see, it tries to use the shortest path to connect these two edges together. I can add to this selection as well by Shift, clicking another edge, and then holding Shift Control and go into somewhere else. And there we go, we've added to our path selection there. So back in Rizom UV then, we can do exactly the same, but with the added bonus of having a preview. So I'm going to go in here and select this edge, and then I'm going to hold Control and Shift, and we get this little preview, which is quite handy. So I'm just going to go up to here and do that, and then I'm going to Shift click this edge here, and then I'm going to Control Shift again and click all the way down here. So now we've got this kind of thing happening. And yet again, I'm going to make that cut by pressing C. Alright, so now we're ready to unwrap. You will find the unwrap settings in the unwrap section of the UI, which is here at the top. We've got the unwrap button or the unfold button. We've also got the optimize button, and we've got a load of other settings here that are associated with unwrapping. I'll be going into a lot more detail with these settings in future tutorials, but for now let's just sort of get this unwrapped and stick to the basics, if you like. So with select mode selected, I'm going to make sure that I'm in UV island mode. I'm going to select everything. In fact, I can do that by pressing Control A. That selects everything. And instead of pressing this button, I'm going to use its shortcut, which should be in this bubble here, which is U. So let's just press U. And as you can see, everything's been unwrapped along our cuts that we made, and it is now laying flat in the UV window. The only problem is our islands are overlapping and they don't seem to be occupying the UV space properly. This brings us to packing. The settings that affect packing can be found at the top of the UI under Layout and Packing Properties here. For the purposes of this tutorial, I'm mainly going to be looking at the Layout section because, again, I'm going to be doing a lot more comprehensive tutorials on packing in the future. Okay, so first we have the Pack button, which is this. When this button is pressed, the selected UV islands will be moved, rotated and scaled relative to each other to fit in the UV space. So let's select all the islands, which in my case I already have selected, and press the Pack button. The shortcut for the Pack button is P. So let's press P. It now appears that the UV islands have disappeared. They haven't, they've just been scaled down to fit the UV space. If we zoom in, we should see our packed islands. There we go, all nicely packed. And they are now all occupying the UV space. Zooming in is fine, but there's a better way. So let's zoom back out and focus on the UV space by pressing the F key. There we go. So there's a few more things I want to cover about the packing section, but I need to move my UV islands. So I'm quickly going to jump back to the edit mode bar over here, and we're going to talk about the transform tool. So let's select the transform tool and select my islands. So I'm going to unselect, I'm going to select the transform tool, and I'm just going to pick this island here. In fact, let's select all of them. Let's do that. As you can see, the islands are now surrounded by a red bounding box with some attached controls. I can move the selection by click dragging inside the bounding box, like so. Control Z to undo. Or I can use the arrow handles to move the selection, like so. I can also rotate my selection by clicking this circle control and dragging up and down. And I can also scale my selection by using these little sort of boxes positioned around the bounding box. Notice how when I use a certain box to scale, the opposite box is used as its scaling point. So even though I'm scaling from this box here, its pivot is kind of like down here. And the same is true if I scale from any other place. It uses the opposite edge or the opposite box to as a pivot. So let's undo that. There is actually another way these kind of transformations can be done. So if we go back to our select tool here and hold down the space bar, let's make our selection first. I can hold down the space bar and we can use left click to drag and move, the middle click and drag to scale, and the right click drag to rotate. Okay, so now that's out of the way, let's return to packing. First I'm going to move our islands out of the UV space using the spacebar transform that I just showed you. So let's pick all that, hold space and left click drag. There we go. I'm also going to rotate my islands, so let's do that. space, there we go. And I'm also going to shrink these down as well, space middle mouse button. And I'm going to make one of these circles bigger. So I'm just going to select this one and move it out of the way. So space, drag, and then I'm going to scale this right up like this. So if I select all of the islands and press the pack shortcut key, so it's this button and that's the P key, the selected islands are packed and are moved, rotated and sized relative to each other and use the maximum amount of UV space possible. So let's undo that. If I select one of the UV islands, so let's choose this one and hit P, only the selected island will be moved, rotated and scaled to be packed using the maximum amount of UV space. Let's undo again. If I select two of my islands, so select these two and hit P, these islands will be packed and scaled relative to each other and use as much UV space as possible. So let's undo one more time. If no islands are selected, so let's make sure nothing's selected, and we hit P, all islands are packed. Okay, so let's undo that and move on to the pack translate, which is this button underneath the pack. The way this button differs from a normal pack is that it does not reorientate our islands and it does not resize our islands relative to each other. We can demonstrate this by turning our checkerboard on. So if I turn that on here, you'll notice that as I've scaled this circle up relative to everything else, you can see that its checkers are a lot closer together and there's more of them. So you could say it's got a bigger texel density than all of these other islands. So this, and this, which is this, all of this and the inside of here, relative to each other, they've got the same texel density. But because I've made this larger, then it really is relative to these in their 3D space, it has a higher texel density. So let's test this by actually selecting everything and running a normal pack first. In fact, I don't need to select everything, I can select nothing. Let's run a normal pack. So these have been rescaled relative to each other, and if we look in here now, you can see that the texel density of this bottom circle now matches all of these. It has a uniform texel density. So let's undo that pack, and let's see how that differs to our pack translate. So let's press the button. Even though our islands have been scaled to utilise more UV space, they have not been scaled relative to each other to have a uniform texel resolution. You can see that this island at the bottom is still got a higher texel density than these islands here. And also important to note, none of our islands have been rotated. Okay, I'm going to perform a regular pack and move on. So let's undo that and let's just hit P. And, we're back to our nice uniform texel resolution. Okay, so let's talk about the margin setting. And that's here at the top. At the moment, it's set to 2. 2 what exactly? Well, if we look to the right, we can see that these units are actually in pixels. So that's 2 pixels. If we zoom in on our UV space, let's say down here, we can see that there is a 2 pixel margin, which is this. This margin ensures that our UV islands are contained within and not butt up against the borders of our UV space. So what is the point or advantage of having this margin? Well, if I'm baking a texture in Cinema 4D and I'm going to use this texture in a game engine, I normally set the bake to extend the texture 5 pixels beyond the UV island borders. The reason for this is because at certain distances in game engines from my object, the seams become visible due to MIP mapping, and by baking over the island borders, this can be completely negated. So I'm going to set my margin to 5 pixels and pack again. So let's make sure nothing's selected. I'm going to set this to 5, and then I'm going to say let's pack. And as you can see, they've shifted slightly, and we've got a bigger margin now by 5 pixels, which is good because, like I said, if I was to over bake my texture for this island here, it would extend beyond here by about 5 pixels, and that margin would save the day. Okay, what about spacing, which is this setting up here, and is currently set to 4. This is the spacing between UV islands in pixels. This may be desirable for the same reason as I've just explained for the margin. So if we have a look here, this will be the spacing between the islands here. So I'm actually going to set the spacing to 10 pixels, and then I'm going to repack by hitting P. And as you can see, we've got a bigger gap now, which is good because I want 5 pixels space for this island and I want 5 pixel space for this island, so I can overshoot the texture slightly. All right, let's move on to the viewport display settings. We'll deal with the 3D view. First, I'll turn off the checkerboard. There we go. First, we have the full display toggle. So this here basically gives us the full layout for the 3D. Okay, so I'm going to go back. Next, we have some shading options. We've got polygon mode, which is this. And then we have the wireframe mode, which is this. And then we have a combination of both of these two here, which is the polygon and wireframe mode. Next is no texture mode, which is already selected. Then we have the checkerboard, which we've already looked at. After that, we have texture grid, I think it is, which is this. And then after that, we have a custom texture. And as you can see, it's empty at the moment. But if you did want to load your own texture, you can go to Files and then load texture map. Next, we have center selection, which we've already looked at by pressing the F key. So if I was to select this island and press F, I would focus on this. If I was to select 2 of these islands, it would focus on these 2. The next button is focus on all, center all even, and that's the hotkey A. So that will just center everything. So if I'm out like this and I press A, it will do that. Perfect. Next we have a lighting toggle. So as you can see, it basically makes everything the same luminosity with no shading. I prefer this view. After that, we have see-through selection. So if I grab a selection of edges, so let's go into edge mode and, I don't know, grab these and then toggle on this see-through selection and then try and look through these polygons. As you can see, I can see my edges through these polygons now, and if I turn it off, the selection becomes invisible. And lastly, we have borders visibility, which makes our seams invisible. So if I go up here, we can see our orange cut seams in the 3D viewport, and if we click this, they get turned off. I have no idea what that would be useful for, but alas, it is an option. Okay, so now moving on to the hide and show features. First of all, we have isolate, which isolates selected islands or whichever island your cursor is over. The shortcut for this is I. So if I hover my cursor over this island and press I, it will isolate it. To show everything again, which is here, you can press Y. You can see the hotkeys Y there. So if I go over this island, I, bring it all back, Y. I, Y. Okay. Next we have hide. Pretty much the same thing as isolate, but it hides it instead. So if I, what is the shortcut for hide? H? Yeah, of course it is. So if I hover over this and press H, it will hide it. Bring it back, and I can hide this one, or any of these. So it's kind of like the invert of isolate, well, kind of. Next we have 3D, which isolates non-flat islands. In my case, all of my islands have been flattened out, so pressing this will cause everything to disappear. So let's hit 3D, and alas, they'll disappear. So let's bring them back. Flats, this will isolate all flat islands, and in my case, everything is flat. So pressing this will do nothing. So let's hit that. Yeah, it's grabbed all of them because they're all flat. Next in line is the show button, which I've already covered a minute ago. Its shortcut is Y. So if all of this stuff was hidden, I might have to choose my islands. That'd help. So let's hide all that. Yeah, and I can hit show, and it brings it all back. Auto's an interesting one. If I click auto on and select my edge tool, any island that hasn't got any edges selected will not be visible. So if I select an edge on the circle here, you can see that it isolates this circle and hides everything else. But if I unselect the edge, everything comes back. So now I can select on this and everything else is hidden. I could even select on this one and everything else is hidden. So that's what this sort of automatic sort of isolation mode does. We've also got another couple of options for non-manifold shapes. This really deals with spherical shapes and, I don't know, like a teapot or something like that. We'll get into that at another time. I think it's not really important for this particular tutorial. Okay, so now we've dealt with that, let's go back to our edit mode tool and let's talk about some of these that we've skipped over. Okay, so first we've got this edit mode drag, and this will actually make a point for me beautifully. If we go into the UV space, we see that we've got this, well, it's a brush actually, and if you look on the side here, we've got our brush settings, so press, radius, so we can minimize our radius if we want. We can see that brings it down. And the profile, I gather this is the fall off of the brush. I'm not going to mess with any of these for the time being, but let's see what this does. As you can see, this drag tool, so let's drag some of our UVs, and as you can see, it does drag the UV polys, and you'll notice that we've got some colors going on here. Now this relates to this bar at the bottom, our stretch map. What this means is, in fact, I can probably, let's undo this. So this is the drag mode, basically. It allows you to drag polys, and the settings for this brush are up here. So we can choose the radius of the brush and all that kind of stuff. So that basically covers that. These next two tools will actually cover what I want to talk about in the stretch bar at the bottom beautifully, actually. So let's go to this, which is the spread mode. So if I spread this, you'll notice that where I spread these polygons out, it's blue. And that's because if we stretch anything out like this, let's do it on this corner, that they are stretched in this direction. Our next tool is a pinch. So if you compress polys together like this, you'll see that they've gone red, and that's where this end of the bar comes in. So this middle grey area in the middle here is basically like, it's desirable. This is what you want. You don't want your polygons to be, UV polygons to be stretched or compressed. You'd like them to be uniform with everything else, and at least match one for one what they are in 3D space. That is desirable. Okay, so next we have the unfold brush. So we can just hit the unfold button, shortcut U, and that will unfold everything. Or we can use this unfold brush. So if I hit the unfold brush and then paint this, you can see that it kind of unfolds just where the brush is. And there we go, we're kind of back. So let's U, P, and we're back to what we was before, kind of. Let's just check that we've got a uniform distribution. Looks like it. Okay, so that's the unfold brush. It's basically like this, but very localized. And the same with the tool underneath. This is the optimized brush. In fact, if we drag some of this out again, I'm just going to change my radius so it's not too big and pull some of this out. Our optimized brush will smooth these out and all the rest of it. And as you can see, we've got some overlapping problems now. U, P, and we're back to where we were. So that's the optimized brush. This ×2 here, this is an interesting one. This deals with density. So if I go to this button here, you can see that this stretch map at the bottom is now changed to a density map. And if we look at our brush settings here, we can see the value is 2 and all the other brush values. So basically what this does is it deals with texel density. So what I could say is, because this is set to 2, let's just paint. So I'm going to paint this here, and then what I'm going to do is run an optimize. And as you can see, this is now deformed. And let's pack this lot, okay? So this is actually twice the texel resolution of what this is. It actually occupies a lot more of the UV space. So if we look around here, you can, this is perfect. This is a normal texel density, but if we look here, you can see that it's twice the texel density. We can fit 2 of these checkers into one of these. And you can mess with that. So we could put this up to 4 if we wanted to, and then paint this again. And as you can see, its texel density is now very big. So let's just UP and optimize again, and then UP, and you can see that we can fit 4 of these texels in one of these things. So this has got far more texel density than the rest of the model. Now that might be handy if you want a higher texel density for, say, the details on a face. So you want the face to have more UV real estate than you do, say, the back of the head, because it might be hidden under some polygon hair or something like that. So that would be a use case for that. This also works in the other negative value. And if we bring this down to 0.5, we can actually paint a negative value and then optimize. And there you go. So you can really hone in what has more or less texel density. I'm actually going to set this back to, I think, 1 is our desired. Yeah, there we go. So we get everything back to normal. And then we can just hit UP and we can optimize everything. Maybe the optimize brush. Yeah, there we go. That'll do. Optimize away. Select UP. Still got some optimizing to do there. UP. Just to point out, I was holding down O there, and it'll basically repeat this optimize function over and over again. It'll iterate through. This protection mode, this is for certain types of cuts, so auto cuts, and I'll be covering that in another tutorial, so I'm going to be leaving this alone for the time being. But before I go, actually, I want to just look at some of the selections up here, and this actually is a perfect opportunity to talk about the align, straighten and flip tool. So if I go into island mode and select this here, I can actually straighten this out using this hotkey which rectangularizes polygons. So if I hit that, you can see that that's straightened out beautifully. And if I pack this again, you can see that we've got a little bit more real estate and all the rest of it. Be careful though, if you unwrap something, I mean in this case it's fine, but if you've got a curved island, it's usually because of the topology of the 3D, and maybe if you straighten it out, you'll start to see some stretching creeping in. A little bit's not a problem, but you know, if you're up here, that could cause you issues. In my case, it's perfect. It's worked out great. Here we can flip stuff. In my case, you're not going to notice because they're symmetrical. So if I pick this and then flipped this, oh, it did actually move it, but I can move that back. But yeah, that's been flipped basically. So let's just undo that. And you can align stuff as well. So you can say, right, I want to grab these two and I want them to align like this, but you're going to get overlapping or whatever. But that is useful if, say, I've got 2 UV islands and I want them to share the same texture space because they're going to be displaying the same bit of the texture. I can do that. That's really good. Okay, so that was just a brief overview of the UI in Rizom UV. I'm going to be getting way more in depth with this program as we move through our tutorials, but I just wanted a general overview of where things are, the kind of things that can be done very, very quickly using hotkeys and the like. Okay, guys, that's it. For my viewers on YouTube, don't forget to like and subscribe and hit that bell to get tutorial notifications. You can also check me out at digitalmeat.uk where you can filter my tutorials by category. You can also follow me on social media, links in the description and the footer of my website. If you'd like to support Digital Meat, this can be done via Patreon or the support page on the website. But if you'd like to support Digital Meat and get extra tutorial content, you can purchase the Prime membership in the store at digitalmeat.uk. For winding down, I have a second channel called Beef Doctor, where I do game streams. Link in the description and the footer of my website. Okay, thanks for watching, guys. Bye!